The moment my husband handed me divorce papers on our honeymoon, I felt the air leave my lungs. His next words cut deeper than any betrayal I could have ever imagined. "I only married you because I bet $10,000 with my friends." I blinked, my mind refusing to process what I had just heard. The Maldivian sunset painted golden streaks across the open balcony, the gentle waves lapping at the shore as if nothing had changed. But in that moment, my entire world had shattered. Logan Reynolds stood before me, casual and composed, as if he had just commented on the weather. His expensive linen shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his sleeves rolled up with calculated ease. He was still the same man I had fallen for, except now I saw him for what he truly was, a fraud. He smirked at my stunned silence, his hazel eyes glinting with amusement. Amusement. He was enjoying this. "You shouldn't take it personally, Alyssa," he continued, his voice dripping with that effortless charm that had once made me weak in the knees. "You were the perfect target. Smart enough to impress people, naive enough to believe in love. You made it easier than I thought." He chuckled, shaking his head like this was all just so amusing to him. I stared at the divorce papers lying on the bed, my name printed neatly alongside his, already signed. I felt my stomach twist. "You planned this," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Logan exhaled, as if this conversation was beginning to bore him. "Of course I planned it. Do you think I would have actually married you otherwise? You were a challenge, Alyssa, and I like winning." A hot wave of humiliation rolled through me. The past year replayed in my mind like a cruel joke. The stolen kisses in the office, the whispered "I love yous," the way he had made me believe we were building something real. I had trusted him, I had loved him, and the whole time I had been nothing more than a bet. I clenched my hands into fists, nails digging into my palms. I refused to cry. Not in front of him. Not in front of a man who had just discarded me like an old business deal that had run its course. Logan grabbed his suitcase, rolling it toward the door. He turned back one last time, tilting his head as if considering something. "You know," he mused, "you should be grateful. You got a beautiful wedding, an exotic honeymoon, and a front row seat to the best corporate game in town." He winked. "Enjoy the villa. Consider it a parting gift." And then he walked out, whistling under his breath, as if he hadn't just destroyed me. For a long time I didn't move. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed. The ocean waves still whispered against the shore. The warm breeze still ruffled the sheer curtains. The scent of tropical flowers still filled the air. But everything inside me was frozen. I finally sat down on the bed, my fingers brushing over the divorce papers. My name stared back at me in stark black ink, the legal wording cold and impersonal. This was real. The man I had married 7 days ago had never loved me. I had never been his wife. I had been his business move, a game, a conquest he had played for the amusement of his executive friends. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing down the lump in my throat. No, I refused to let this be the end of my story. Slowly I reached for my phone. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through my contacts, stopping on the name I never thought I'd need to call, Cameron Blake. I took a deep breath and typed out a message. "The key you gave me, is that office still available?" The reply came almost instantly. "Always was." A slow, determined fire ignited in my chest. Logan thought he had won. He thought I would be too humiliated, too broken to fight back. He was wrong. Because Logan Reynolds had just made a very, very expensive mistake. The doors of Blackwood Global Enterprises slid open, and I walked in with a confidence I didn't fully feel yet, but I was determined to fake it until it became real. The marble floors gleamed under the morning sun, the familiar hum of corporate conversations filling the air. It had been exactly 1 week since Logan walked out on me in the Maldives, and here I was. Not broken, not defeated, but ready. I had spent those 7 days strategizing, replaying every interaction, every conversation, and every red flag I had ignored. Logan had underestimated me. He thought I would disappear, resign quietly, and leave him and his arrogant friends to gloat over their cruel little bet. But instead of running, I had done what Logan never expected. I returned. And I wasn't coming back as his discarded wife. I was coming back for war. Cameron Blake was waiting for me at the top floor, standing behind his massive glass desk. He was an imposing figure, mid-40s, sharp suit, and sharper mind. He had built Blackwood into a financial empire, and unlike Logan, he never played games he couldn't afford to lose. The moment he saw me, a slow smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. I had a feeling you'd take me up on that office key eventually. I took a seat across from him, my back straight, my heart pounding. I'm not here for sympathy, Cameron. I'm here for an opportunity. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Good. I don't waste my time on people looking for sympathy. That was the thing about Cameron. He didn't pity people. He recognized value, and right now I needed to prove that I had plenty of it. I placed a folder on his desk filled with weeks of research, projections, and strategies Logan never even bothered to consider. I had spent months working on these numbers, only to have my efforts overshadowed by Logan's effortless charm. Cameron flipped through the pages, his sharp blue eyes scanning my work. Then, after a long moment, he set the folder down. I always knew you were talented, Alyssa, he said smoothly. Logan knew it too. That's why he picked you. I swallowed down the bitterness rising in my throat. He picked me because I was his bet, I said, voice steady. But he never saw my real worth. You do. So tell me, what do I need to do to get a seat at this table? A slow smile spread across Cameron's face. You already have it. That was the day I officially stopped being Logan Reynolds' naive wife and became his biggest problem. The shift in the office was almost immediate. Whispers followed me everywhere. Some people pitied me, others admired me, and a select few, Logan's friends, resented me. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on climbing. Within 2 months, my work spoke for itself. My strategies increased department efficiency by 20%. My financial projections landed Blackwood its most profitable quarter yet, and my name was now being mentioned in rooms where Logan used to reign uncontested. And Logan? He hated it. He had expected me to disappear. Instead, he had to watch me rise. I noticed the way he avoided me in meetings, the tension in his jaw every time Cameron praised my work, the way his executive friends, the same ones who had laughed about our marriage bet, started drifting away from him. I could see it in his eyes. He was losing control. One afternoon, as I walked past the executive lounge, I overheard exactly what I needed. Logan's losing his grip, one of the board members muttered. Blake's grooming Alyssa for something bigger. Not possible, another scoffed. Logan's been Blackwood's golden boy for years. There was a pause. Then, that was before he got distracted playing games. Turns out the woman he tried to humiliate is more valuable than he ever was. I smirked to myself. Game on, Logan. 3 months after my return, Blackwood Global Enterprises hosted its annual corporate retreat. This was where Logan had proposed to me a year ago, where he had made me believe we were building a future together, while he was secretly planning my humiliation. Now, I was walking into that same retreat as Cameron Blake's right hand. This wasn't just a weekend of networking, it was Logan's final warning, and he knew it. From the moment we arrived, I saw the shift in Logan's demeanor. The confidence he once carried so effortlessly was starting to crack. Cameron and I spent the first evening strategizing in private meetings, while Logan was left sipping cocktails with the very executives who were already betting on his downfall. But the real moment of reckoning came during the final night's dinner. The resort's dining hall was filled with Blackwood's most powerful figures, the atmosphere buzzing with energy. Cameron sat at the head of the table, and to Logan's horror, the seat beside him, the seat that had once belonged to Logan, was now mine. As the meal progressed, the conversation shifted toward expansion strategies. Cameron turned to me, his voice carrying authority. Alyssa, why don't you walk us through your plan for the Pacific Rim investment? I felt Logan's gaze burn into me as I picked up my glass, sipping my wine slowly before speaking. Of course, I said smoothly. We've secured 3 major partnership deals that will increase our market share by 30%. Unlike previous strategies, I cast a casual glance toward Logan. This approach is built on long-term sustainability rather than short-term risks. A murmur of approval spread across the table. Logan clenched his jaw. He knew exactly what I was doing. Cameron leaned back, clearly enjoying the moment. And what's your projection for the first quarter? Profits should exceed expectations by at least 12 million. Silence, then applause. Logan's fingers tightened around his fork. I had just destroyed him in front of the entire Blackwood leadership team. And then came the final blow. One of the senior board members, a man who had always been in Logan's corner, cleared his throat. Impressive work, Alyssa. We could use more decisive leadership like this at the senior level. Cameron's lips twitched with amusement. I couldn't agree more. The implication was clear. Logan had once been the favorite. Now he was replaceable, and I was the one replacing him. As the evening ended, I caught Logan standing near the terrace, his drink untouched, his gaze locked onto me. He looked like a man who had finally realized his mistake. I walked past him, pausing just long enough to say, "Feeling nervous, Logan?" His jaw flexed. "I underestimated you." I smiled. "Yes, you did." Then I walked away, leaving him in the wreckage of his own making. The moment I walked into Blackwood Global Enterprises, the Monday after the corporate retreat, I knew the tide had shifted completely. The whispers had grown louder. The looks from executives who once dismissed me now carried something different. Calculation, maybe even respect. Logan had spent years charming his way into power, believing that his confidence alone would keep him untouchable. But now, he was losing. Not just his influence, not just the unwavering support of the board. He was losing everything. And the best part? He was watching me take it all. By the time the next quarterly board meeting arrived, my presence at the table was no longer questioned. Logan, on the other hand, sat stiffly in his chair, his usual arrogance buried beneath the weight of what was coming. Cameron started the meeting as usual, running through projections and upcoming expansions, until finally he leaned forward and dropped the bombshell. As we move forward into our next phase of international development, the board has made some strategic restructuring decisions. I watched Logan's fingers tighten around his pen. He knew what was coming. Cameron continued, his voice steady, controlled. Given recent performance and the evolving needs of the company, we've decided that a new leadership structure will better serve our long-term goals. He glanced at me, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Effective immediately, Alyssa Harrington will be promoted to Executive Vice President of International Operations. The board members nodded in approval. The applause was instant. I sat there perfectly composed as I felt Logan's entire world collapse beside me. His greatest mistake? Underestimating me. Cameron continued, as if Logan's downfall wasn't unfolding in real time. This means that Alyssa will be overseeing all international expansion efforts, including the Morrison Group partnership. Logan inhaled sharply. The Morrison Group was his project. It had been his flagship account, the deal that had given him so much leverage in the company. And now it belonged to me. I turned my head slightly, locking eyes with him for just a moment. He looked pale, shaken, furious, but I wasn't finished yet. As for other restructuring measures, Cameron went on, flipping to the next set of documents, Logan Reynolds' position will be reallocated. Given the adjustments in our corporate focus, he will be transitioning into a regional role overseeing. He paused, then looked up. The Minneapolis office. A dead silence filled the room. Minneapolis. A regional office miles away from Blackwood's headquarters. It wasn't a promotion. It was exile. Logan's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. You can't be serious. Cameron lifted a brow. It's already been approved. The board believes your skill set is better suited for a smaller market. I almost laughed. Smaller market. Translation? You lost. Get out. Logan's face turned red, and for the first time since I had returned, he looked truly afraid. This wasn't just about his job. This was his reputation, his status, The very foundation of his entire career was being ripped away from him, by me. He opened his mouth, maybe to protest, maybe to beg, but I cut him off before he could even start. "Congratulations on your new role, Logan," I said smoothly. "I'm sure you'll do great things, on a smaller scale." The meeting adjourned, and as the executives filed out, Logan remained frozen in his chair. He couldn't move, because it had finally hit him. The real bet, the one he had placed against me, had just cost him everything. 2 weeks later, Logan packed up his office. I made sure to walk past just in time to see it. The man who had once tossed divorce papers at me like I was nothing now looked like a shadow of himself. His office, the same one where he had built his entire identity, was now stripped bare. His nameplate had already been removed. I stood at the door watching as he shoved the last of his things into a box. He finally looked up. I expected anger. I expected some final attempt at control, but instead, he just looked hollow. I tilted my head. "You know, Logan, you were right about one thing." He exhaled slowly. "What's that?" I smiled. "I really was the perfect bet." His jaw tightened. I turned on my heel and walked away, heels clicking against the polished marble floors. I didn't need revenge, because my success had already become his greatest punishment. 5 years later, I stood on the stage at Harvard Business School, delivering a keynote speech to hundreds of young business graduates. My name, Alyssa Blake, was now listed as one of the top corporate strategists in the world. I had built my career from the ground up. Without Logan, without his lies, without his betrayal, without his cruel little bet. In the front row, Cameron Blake, now my husband, watched me with pride. Because what Logan never understood was that he hadn't destroyed me. He had freed me. As the applause thundered through the room, I knew one thing for sure. Some women aren't meant to be played. They are meant to win.